Media days are in Las Vegas, so the signal of the new era, the new West Coast presence in the Big Ten. And so, Ethan, we talked about the storylines for Big Ten Media Days before we started our show. To me, one eye grabber, before we get into USC specifically, is Dante Moore, Oregon's quarterback, being given the keys to the Ducks offense, not at Big Ten Media Days. That's notable. Your assessment of and before we really get into this, it's not as though Oregon's quarterback's not going to be good because he wasn't invited to Big Ten Media Days. It's not really that. However, I do think there are some signals. There are clear tactical goals that a coaching staff has when it selects some players and doesn't select other players. So just with that in mind, your reaction to Dante Moore of Oregon not going to Big Ten Media Days in Vegas.
Right. So let me pull up the list real quick of everyone who's going to be there, just for everybody to have a little something to look at. I'll scroll down to Oregon just so we can have that for our discussion here. I believe, I just passed them twice, didn't I? They're right there. So
we love to pass up Oregon here at USC. So
I guess symbolic.
Symbolic.
Love to pay them no attention. Love to at least want to pay them no attention, I suppose. We are forced to pay them attention in the last.
We'll pay them this much attention.
For sure.
But of course, we are talking about them.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's still a hot topic. I mean,
yes,
they're a loud, flashy program, even if they haven't won anything. So they're gonna get people's attention. They're gonna capture people's emotions for sure.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I mean, if there's any Oregon fans watching this right now, I think they're going to come back and say something along the lines of, "Well, Jaden Mailava is not going to Big Ten Media Days either."
Yeah, touche.
Is a fair point. I think the reason why USC doesn't send someone like Jaden Mailava is pretty obvious, which is that Jaden Mailava is just not the greatest interview ever. I think Jaden Mailava is very shy, very quiet. He says a lot of great stuff. He's very program positive and, just always, exhibits real trust in the head coaching staff. He's not like a guy. I don't think that you send when you want what he says to, generate excitement for the program. I don't think. He's just not the greatest interview ever, which is no knock on him. It's not, like a drawback of having Jaden Mailava as your quarterback. We want him to play good football. We don't want him to give good interviews as much. I mean, it's always great for us in the media when he does, but we want him to play good football first and foremost. So I think that's the clear answer there. Dante Moore, the answer is obviously less clear. We haven't seen him play any football. We haven't seen him take the media limelight as much. So that's why some more questions arise with him not being there for sure. And just also, Oregon football has had so many great leaders in the recent past in terms of, what Bo Nix did there with the program, just totally revived his career. I mean, Bo Nix was always one of the most exciting prospects, but just was so inconsistent at Auburn. And then he goes to Oregon and just turns, public perception of him does a complete 180 because of, just how he endears himself to the program endears itself to him, and just a match made in heaven, to be honest with you. Then Dylan Gabriel has a great final year there as well. And Dylan Gabriel is I think he has the most touchdowns of any quarterback ever, or Dylan Gabriel's been around the block. He's played a lot of football. So you go from those to a sophomore quarterback who's completed 7 passes in his career, I think. Let me look at his ESPN page. Yeah, 7 for 8 in his career with 49 passing yards. He's not done anything. That's basically the point. And so I think there's a clear drop off there. So I mean, maybe he's being judged a little bit more harshly by the Oregon program for his leadership skills, just because they had 2 such fantastic, A1 leaders in their room these past couple of years. But I mean, maybe there is something to be said. You want to instill confidence in your guys, like we've talked about. Dante Moore is not necessarily like we talked about an experienced quarterback, but he is like a flashy, eye-grabbing name. He has a lot of potential. He is a guy who you would kind of want to represent your brand, I would think, especially as a place like Oregon, which is, the flashier million uniforms, and great social media team, the Nike school, all that stuff. They've always been a culture adjacent school, if that makes sense. And Dante Moore is someone who, if he pans out, could be like a flashy superstar who gets a lot of the clicks and a lot of the social media attention, all that stuff. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think they're sending a linebacker, a tight end, and an outside linebacker. It's very clear that they're, to me, almost trying to supplement their identity that, I just talked about, of being flashy and fast and exciting, with being physical now that they're in the Big Ten. I think that that's very possible, especially probably after they got bullied in the Big Ten and not in the Big Ten, in the college football playoff against Ohio State last year. So
I was just about to say that Oregon picking a two linebackers and a tight end, that says, like, we know Ohio State bullied us. We know Ohio State threw us around like a dirty old rag, and we need to be so much tougher, on the big stage. I think that is a clear message. So it's a really interesting comparison, Ethan, between Jaden Maiava and Dante Moore, not just as quarterbacks in and of themselves, but, both programs not bringing the quarterbacks to Big Ten Media Days. You see on the screen, like, Northwestern's bringing its quarterback to Big Ten Media Days. And it just kind of, it gets you thinking, right, that, either you're a rock star program, like we also see Penn State bringing Drew Aller, because Drew Aller is supposed to be the dude. So, of course, you bring him to Big Ten Media Days. But then some people will say, why is Northwestern bringing its quarterback? Well, Northwestern has zero expectations, right? Northwestern probably isn't expected to go to a bowl game. So you put your leader fourth. It's not high-stakes poker for Northwestern. You want your leader to kind of feel good about himself. You want to put him in Vegas. You want to put him in front of the bright lights, see if, he grows from that. Because Northwestern has nothing to lose. But at USC and Oregon, it's a situation where, these programs expect to succeed, and yet they know their quarterbacks are not fully proven. So you don't just want to put them up there and say, well, have the media just saying, well, do you think you're ready? Well, do you think you're going to prove yourself? Well, do you think you're going to do it? And that's just going to be repetitive, and they're probably just going to get sick and tired. It's not going to be a fun experience. So, these are the things that coaches need to think through. And I would say, just being serious, we're not trying to clown on Oregon all the time. We certainly love our little rib pokes here on the USC channel at the Voice of College Football. But we also try to tell it straight. And telling it straight, Dan Lanning made a good choice. He shouldn't have Dante Moore there. He needs to keep him kind of in the shadows. He needs to kind of slow walk his quarterback, because that is a question mark. It's a huge question mark. One could say it's the question mark for this Oregon team. So, if I were Dan Lanning, yes, I would have kept Dante Moore home as well. And Lincoln Riley, I think he made a smart decision to keep Jaden Maiava home. So I think both coaches are being smart about this. But as we get into this Maiava Moore comparison, Ethan, one of the things that I failed to do. So, I'm a public commentator. I have to say when I'm wrong. I have to own up. I have to take the L. Just be a man, be a grown-up. That's part of the business. I took the L with Bo Nix. I thought he would struggle at Oregon. Bo Nix throws picks. That was the mantra at Auburn. And the thing I didn't account for was Oregon has an excellent offensive line. And that has been the heart of the Oregon football program and why it's been successful. Successful under Mario Cristobal, successful, a decade ago under Chip. And also, the Marcus Mariota 2014 Heisman season as well. The Oregon offensive lines keep the pocket clean. They put their quarterback in the best possible position to succeed. Bo Nix did not have that at Auburn. So I, a dum-dum, I thought, oh, look at all the stats at Auburn. And I did not carry into the equation, hey, Oregon has a skull crusher offensive line with big bad dudes who are going to keep Bo Nix clean, that's going to make Bo Nix a better quarterback. I being stupid did not, put the 2 and 2 together there. That's also why Bo Nix had such a good rookie year with the Broncos, because Sean Payton built around the offensive line. He gave Bo Nix short, easy, high percentage passes to throw. Like, that's how Bo Nix should be used, and that's how Bo Nix can be really effective. So I whiffed on Bo Nix, and so when we get back into this USC Oregon comparison, people will be drawn to the 1 versus 1 comparison, Ethan. This guy versus that guy, Maava versus Moore. But in many ways, this is really the measurement of offensive lines, and is USC's offensive line ready to match the Oregon offensive line standard? Because Oregon sent Penei Sewell to the pros as a first-round pick, Josh Connerly to the NFL as a first-round pick. I mean, Oregon's really crushing it with its offensive line development and its offensive line portal pickups. And USC has not matched that standard, and that's why, Zach Hanson and this USC offensive line are so important. So when we compare Maava versus Dante Moore, Ethan, this is what I'm going to ask. What are the other details you think that we might be underrating or overlooking or missing? What are the other puzzle pieces that we as analysts, but also all the fans sitting at home watching here at the Voice of College Football need to be accounting for? Because it's not just one guy versus one guy and we compare stats on a sheet. No, there's a lot more that goes into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to think about the recruitment and the development of these two quarterbacks. I mean, Dante Moore is a guy who was sitting at UCLA before he went to Oregon, and then Jaden Maaba is a guy who USC picked up from UNLV. So Dante Moore kind of started out more as that D1 prospect. He didn't really play at UCLA, again, 7 for 8, but was a guy who was a little bit more highly regarded before he went to Oregon versus in terms of like his recruitment, that is. I mean, Maava played a lot at UNLV and did a lot at UNLV. And I'm not discounting that at all, but in terms of like the starting place, I think in the sense, in terms of media day, I think it's almost more interesting, I think, from like taking off my USC hat for a minute, from like a just general college football fans standpoint, that Maava isn't there just because he has more experience and has been the leader of the USC offense before, versus, Dante Moore has never been there. So it makes, again, perfect sense that he's not considered a representative of the Oregon program because he's never been in the Oregon program before. But, the offensive line, you make a really good point, because we talked a little bit last week about how USC is sending Elijah Page, and that was kind of our big storyline from the representatives that USC is picking, is that Elijah Page is going. And that obviously could go one of two ways. That's either, and I think it's a little bit of both of these actually, which is a, kind of a sign of confidence in Elijah Page, and also like a way to boost his confidence as well. It's like, we're confident in you, from a very PR standpoint, but also in the back of our heads, we're like trying to make you more confident so you can step up and be this big dog at left tackle. So, I mean, it's definitely a bold move if you're USC to send Elijah Page, because I think it invites a little bit more scrutiny on him. I mean, you're sending him alongside two guys who are very proven and who are very clearly going to be stars on this team, in Kamari Ramsey and in Mekhi Lemon. So, I mean, if he goes and has the kind of, if he goes and has a disappointing season, if he regresses from last year, doesn't really get any better, or, has another game like Michigan where he goes on the road to a Big Ten program and just completely falls apart. Some of those media guys, especially those West Coast media guys who, it's a little bit easier to travel to Las Vegas this year, that were at Big Ten Media Days and remember Elijah Page being there, are going to look at it a little bit like, oh, like, he was supposed to be this big representative of the program, and now he's, kind of a weak link. But anyway, I do think But I'm high on Elijah Page. I think he's going to do well. I think it's more the rest of the offensive line that USC has to worry about. I mean, the news came out the other day that DJ Wingfield is still fighting for eligibility. They don't know if he's going to get it. That's the transfer they got out of Purdue. And then, there's some other plug and play transfer guys and some other, younger guys who just haven't really proven themselves yet. And so it's just a little bit all over the place. But it's still a good sign that someone like Elijah Page is someone that can represent USC, just because he's a development success story. If he does turn out to be a star, if he does turn out to be kind of the class of the Big Ten at left tackle, then that's, good job USC. You developed a star left tackle. That's difficult to do, and they've obviously had a lot of trouble doing that. I do think the other thing that's going to be a big storyline for these quarterbacks, outside of themselves and how they play, is going to be just their receiving core, because I think USC's receiving core has gotten a lot of preseason attention, but again, it's based a lot on potential and not based a lot on production. I mean, Jacoby Lane had like an incredible end to last season, but he hasn't put up those numbers over a full season yet. And then Mekhi Lemon had a lot more of a consistently productive season, but it was still just a little bit up and down, and not a 1,000-yard season by any means, at least. So I think from a USC perspective, you really want to see those guys. And again, Mekhi Lemon's a representative, so they anticipate him being a star and they want him to be representative of the program. You want to see those guys really step up and really be superstars like everybody thinks that they're going to be. And then you take a little bit of the pressure off Mailava, and then, you're not, and then everybody kind of benefits. Everybody's a little bit better in the media's eyes. The receivers have a great season. They get all the flowers. Mailava gets all the flowers. And, we're all happy about how that all turned out, for sure. So, and then, Oregon, it's always a story as well. They have a lot of receivers that they've sent to the NFL recently. And like I said, big, flashy skill position school that loves their skill position players. Everybody's going to have a big eye on them as well. So that's a position around the quarterback that I think is going to factor in a lot this year with those two.
All right, so Big Ten Media Days, let's put the focus squarely on USC for a moment here. In college football, when coaches are hired, people talk about, winning the press conference. Did he really connect with the fan base and the culture and the expectations? And, media days are kind of that same thing. Is the coach saying the right things? Is he setting the right tone? Is he striking the right balance? And, coaches speaking in public, like, they're paid to win games. They're not paid to make great speeches. Deshaun Foster of UCLA very memorably just was deer in the headlights at Big Ten Media Days a year ago, but he actually coached very well. UCLA overachieved, and just about everyone would say UCLA overachieved last season. Still didn't get to a bowl because they're the Bruins, but UCLA was thought by many to be like a 2-10, 3-9 team. Bruins go 5-7. Deshaun Foster coached his butt off last season. So the fact that his speech at Big Ten Media Days was a disaster, it was not an indicator of any sort in terms of how good UCLA was going to be, how well positioned UCLA was. The public speaking, how you carry yourself in front of a podium, that's very different from how you coach on Saturday. So there's no clean correlation between the two. That said, it's going to be a point of interest what Lincoln Riley says. And so Ethan Inman, I'm going to ask you what you would like to see or perhaps hear from Lincoln Riley at Big Ten Media Days. And I'm going to give my answer up front while you think about yours. I just want Lincoln Riley to take ownership of his mistakes. That's what I want. I want some humility from Lincoln Riley, but not in that kind of syrupy, old-timey way that coaches do, like, Lou Holtz, playing possum. He'd make Notre Dame or South Carolina out to be the little sisters of the poor. I don't want that. That's kind of false humility, right? I want Lincoln Riley to just say, you know what, we're going upward at USC because of this great recruiting class that Chad Bowden has brought in. There were things about the college football business I thought I knew, but I didn't, and I needed help, and now I have that help, and I'm thrilled that USC is supporting me. That's the kind of thing I'd like to see and hear from Lincoln Riley at Big Ten Media Days. I don't want him talking up 2025 unless he's ready to deliver. Okay, so like, doesn't necessarily matter whether he talks up this year's team or not. It's just if he chooses to go that route, well, okay, buddy, you need to follow through. I want to see some humility where Lincoln Riley is not getting ahead of his skis. I want him to kind of be level-headed and to just, you and I have talked about this, Ethan. We don't want him to act like he's the smartest guy in the room. Like that's when Lincoln Riley steps into a pothole, right? That's what I want to get from Big Ten Media Days, that Lincoln Riley just has an extra ounce of humility, and he's willing to convey that in public, instead of carping about, being behind the curve and not having resources, and, well, we were playing catch up. Like, I don't want whining. I don't want him to puff out his chest either. I want some candor and honesty that comes with a little bit of, self-knowledge, that kind of shows that Lincoln Riley is ready to put himself in his own modest place. That's what I want to get from Lincoln Riley. What about you?
I think that's a great point, Matt. I think that, as someone who's been around the USC football program pretty consistently for the last 3 years, I covered all of the home games and a handful of the away games. So I heard a lot of Lincoln Riley, and I feel like, and I heard a lot of my fellow media members as well. And I feel like everybody's frustration with him was just that he was so positive. He had always had a very positive spin, even like the most devastating moment for USC in the past, in Lincoln Riley's tenure, basically was losing the Pac-12 championship game against Utah. And even then it was a lot of like, man, Caleb Williams went out and put out a heroic effort, and, just what he did on his leg. A lot of the focus was like, let's celebrate Caleb Williams and his season. And Caleb Williams deserved celebration for his competitiveness. I often go back, and something that I like to relitigate is thinking about if Lincoln Riley kind of put his foot down and put Miller Moss in that game, how USC would have fared. I still don't think they would have won. I just think it's an interesting thing to kind of think about sometimes. But he's just always, let's celebrate Caleb Williams for, trying to fight through his leg injury, even though, he couldn't run, and it was completely fizzled out the USC offense because he couldn't do anything compared to what he normally could. And, a lot of that last year, the recurring sentence that I heard a lot was, we were 1 or 2 plays away from winning. And that's not inaccurate. I mean, if you watch the football games, that was often true. I mean, Penn State, Minnesota, even Michigan to an extent, like a lot of these games against big high-profile programs, you change 1 or 2 plays, the outcome of 1 or 2 plays, and you can directly see how that leads to a USC win. It's true. It's not false. It's not like he's lying. But it's just, like, it conveys like this unspoken, like, kind of satisfaction with, oh, we put forward a great effort. We just were 1 or 2 plays away.
We came close.
Yeah. We got unlucky. Close only matters in horseshoes and hand grenades, as they say. So, it's still a loss. It goes down in the scorebook as an L. And like you did very, very nicely earlier, like 10 minutes ago, you have to take your L's sometimes. And he just refused to take his L's. He was always very like, looking for moral victories. And I'm not anti-positivity. I'm a pretty positive, optimistic guy myself. I like to hear positivity and confidence, and
but we don't want to relive Clay Helton. That's what he did. Lincoln Riley's not supposed to be Clay Helton.
Yep, Lincoln Riley's not Clay Helton, and just when it becomes a pattern, these things get old. Like you can say that against Michigan, and you can say that against Penn State, but when you're saying that against Maryland, it's like, we're a better team than Maryland. Like it, yeah, sure, we were 1 or 2 plays away from winning, but we never should have been 1 or 2 plays away from winning. We should have been, 2 or 3 touchdowns ahead of winning. That's kind of the problem. Is USC is not a program that's content with eking out wins, especially against inferior opponents like Washington, Maryland. Those were games we should have blown the door off of them in the second quarter, and it shouldn't have even been a worry by the time the fourth quarter came around. So I just think, yeah, more accountability, like you said, a little bit more like we're not just looking to win football games, we're looking to dominate football games. I would like to hear that from him. A couple just other smaller storylines that I think would be interesting. I'm sure he'll get questions about, the new strength coach. I'd love to hear what he thinks of Tremaine Carroll. I think that'll be really interesting. I also would be interested to hear what he has to say about continuing the USC Notre Dame rivalry, because we've very prominently heard Marcus Freeman's comments, which is, I'm not, whether this is true of Notre Dame or not, Marcus Freeman is certainly winning the PR war by saying, I'll take on USC anytime, anywhere. I always want to play USC, period. He can say that. He's in, a great position to say that. With the year Notre Dame had last year, we don't know if the university actually thinks that, but that's what Marcus Freeman is saying. And that's the kind of attitude I'd like to hear from Lincoln Riley, even if, because what are the consequences if behind closed doors, the university doesn't feel that way. It's just Lincoln Riley sharing his personal opinion. Like I want confidence, and I just want more, I'd like to see him seeking to dominate football games more than just, like you said, compete and almost win football games. So those are the two main things. A few players too that I'm interested in hearing. It's obviously going to be super interesting to hear what he has to say on Maava. And the 3 guys that are there for sure. And just also some of the younger guys. The defensive line, I think, is something to keep an eye on, just because it's so big, so much bigger now. Defensive line obviously had a subpar season last year, but there's a lot of really promising guys. So going to be paying close attention to that. But the main thing is just confidence, and also, just mainly confidence and seeking to win football games by more than, enough of this, like, hey, we did a pretty good job, and we could have won if 1 or 2 plays went differently. Like, no, that's not enough. We want to take care of teams and win games by long before the fourth quarter comes around, and we have any chance to screw